Okay, so good morning, good afternoon to everybody, and welcome to this session on leveraging the science of happiness at work to boost performance. So, there are a few of us attending in person, and we expect that many more will attend according to their own schedule and watch the recording. So, welcome to all of you as well. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen and get this session started. I will introduce myself a little bit later. First of all, I want to kick off by asking a question. How does happiness at work, or the lack of it, show up? Show up for you and in your workplaces. And this is something that you can all do, whether you're live or not. I'm scrolling a PDF, by the way. Can I just have nods that you can see my slides? I'm now on to the slide. What are the behaviors that you see? Great. Okay. All right. So we all know instinctively the people in our offices, in our organizations who are unhappy at work because we see and we observe their behaviors. And without having studied the science of happiness at work, we know, don't we? But we also know when somebody's happy at work because we also see those behaviors. So I'm going to invite you just to either do a shout out or pop some stuff in the chat, and we'll see what we've got. What do we see in somebody who's unhappy at work? What are those behaviors that tell us that give us that information? So I see Isabel. Yeah, you see people are difficult. They can be argumentative. Wouter, they can be unmotivated. Or yes, Marcia, they're just quiet. Or Fernanda, grumpy, not cooperative. Defensive, Ross, they complain about others. Yeah, absolutely. We see a lot of that stuff. We also might see really sort of low energy or disengaged behaviors. We see them or hear them complaining. We just feel that energy a lot around us. And what about for somebody who's happy at work? What do we see there? What are those behaviors? Okay, so obviously we get those engaged behaviors. How do we know somebody's engaged? We see their energy. Yes, we feel that they're energized as they go about their daily activities. What else tells us? Yeah, they're asking questions. They're curious about others. We may hear their laughter. They're actually jolly. They're jolly people to be around. They share information. They don't harbor that information to themselves. They're creative, they're innovative, they show initiative. So all of the positive opposites of those people who are not happy, that are unhappy in the workplace. Thank you for sharing your ideas. So in essence, what we see and what we experience is that unhappy people, if we were to give all of those behaviors an umbrella statement, we would say those people are unproductive. They are low performers, and happy people are the positive opposite. They're our productive people, our high performing employees. And this is what we instinctively know. And we know that the difference between those happy people and those high performing people and the behaviors of the unhappy, low performing people really matters in terms of how we experience work. And work experience, our experience of going to work every day, is a huge chunk of our lives. Over the course of a lifetime, we will have spent something like 112,000 hours at work, far more hours than we've spent socializing with friends or that we've spent in activities with our loved ones. We spend the greatest chunk of that time at work. So this cost of misery is that difference in those behaviors. And it used to be that unhappy, unproductive behaviors in the workplace were almost expected. They were the norm. That, you know, in the olden days, that work was supposed to be some kind of drudgery, some, you know, it wasn't to be enjoyed. But times have changed. And now, especially post-COVID, there's been a radical change in behaviors and expectations in the workplace. And people are no longer tolerant of those negative behaviors that pull them down. They expect their employer, and therefore the leadership and their managers, to exemplify and model positive behaviors that enable them to enjoy their work and to be happy at work. And there's a cost of misery if that's not happening. The cost is not just economic and financial, because we know that, you know, if we've got high unhappiness rates in our organizations, people leave that organization. So we've got the cost of attrition, we've got the cost of low productivity, we've got the cost of rehiring, the costs of re-onboarding people and retraining people, and the lost team dynamics, and the lost history, the legacy of product knowledge, service knowledge, client knowledge. So there's a huge economic and financial knock-on. But there's also a cost of misery that is within the individual, the mental, emotional, and physical tolls to our health. And the impact of that has repercussions way beyond the workplace. It infiltrates the family home. During COVID, of course, there was no difference for a lot of people between the workplace and the home. And the work-life balance in this new era of work is more of a work-life integration. So the cost of misery is no longer acceptable. And during COVID times also, there was a sort of opening up of it's okay to have emotions, it's okay to be human, and organizations became more humane. We acknowledge that that especially during COVID times, there was heightened anxiety, heightened stress, and that workplaces had to acknowledge this and help their employees, especially with the rise in loneliness. And by the way, loneliness doesn't just happen when you're working from home. Loneliness in the workplace can happen in an office when you're surrounded by a team. If there's little collaboration and little camaraderie in your team. So the cost of misery is huge in some organizations, and those organizations where it is huge do not retain their top talent. I want to distinguish between happiness at work, the very specific term of happiness at work, from general happiness, the overall happiness that we all seek as human beings in life. And happiness at work, as we've said, is a big part of that. But our general happiness and happiness in general, there are three different types. And it's important that we understand the definitions, the academic research that goes behind this, so we understand the different types and get ourselves all on the same page when we're talking about happiness at work and the science of happiness at work. So let's start with emotional happiness. Emotional happiness is your minute-to-minute emotional well-being, your experience of being in this moment right now. So it's akin to your mood. And it really has, as you know, ups and downs. It fluctuates during the day, and it's not long lasting. When people talk about happiness in a kind of colloquial, casual way, in conversation with friends, we tend to be talking about emotional happiness. It's not long, it doesn't last over time. It's very subjective, and it's contextual as well, depending on what we're dealing with. Some people can find emotional happiness at the bottom of a bottle of beer. That's not obviously what we're talking about when we're talking about happiness at work. And emotional happiness is sometimes referred to as pleasure. So the second type of happiness is trait happiness. the day that you were born and your mother held you in your arms and looked into your little eyes, already 50% of your trait happiness was set in stone. It's genetically coded into you by your parenting. And you know, we're talking about your personality. So 50% of your happiness is you have a predisposition to it from your parenting. But that also means that there's another 50% that you have at your disposition, right? So 50% trait happiness, 50% will be the circumstances that you find yourself in, as well as your voluntary choice of how you go about and how you address your day to day. So that is where we're going. We've got, and that is a bigger part of that 50%, by the way. Your voluntary disposition can be up to 40%, and I'm referring to the research of Sonia Lyubomirsky. So it's a mindset. What we are talking about when we talk about happiness at work is a mindset. And that means that it's an amalgamation of your emotional landscape, your internal emotional landscape, as well as your cognitive resources, and the way you're looking after both your emotional and your cognitive resources. It's a state. It's a state which is a sort of mid-level happiness. It's not as spiky as the emotional happiness. It enables us with this mindset to navigate the ups and downs, and those are inevitable at work, the inevitable ups and downs of being at work. So it's a medium state mindset, or a state of mind. And this is what we're dealing with when we're talking about happiness at work. And there are certain disciplines and techniques that we can use to become more conscious of our mindset and this happiness at work mindset when we're at work. We can do stuff about that. So we do have agency in our happiness at work. And this happiness at work, therefore, if we use our definition coined by Eye Opener's founder, Jessica Price Jones, and her book of the same title, she says, happiness at work is a mindset that enables action to optimize your performance and to achieve your potential. So think of that. We're talking about optimizing your performance in a work setting. And this humane or human drive to achieve more potential. That's what we are all driven to do. You just need to look at a 2-year-old trying to build a block of a tower block with wooden blocks, or a 4-year-old making something, creating something out of Lego. We all have this innate need to achieve our potential and to drive for more of it. Of course, sometimes it does get knocked out of us by society, upbringing, culture, where we start to have limiting beliefs that we don't believe we have so much potential, but we do all have that. And part of our works as coaches trained in the science of happiness at work is to remind people that they have that potential and they can tap into it more just by doing certain things. So I'm going to take a step back, and I want to introduce you to Eye Opener Institute. We're an Oxford-born consultancy, and everything that we do in our work with business schools and organizations throughout the world is underpinned by the science of happiness at work. Our strapline is that we help make work better. That's what it's all about. We develop people and organizational performance through this power of happiness at work. So we help organizations build positive organizational cultures. We work with leadership teams and deliver a whole array of leadership development programs. And we help people increase their happiness at work through this science, which I'm going to introduce you to. So the research journey at Eye Opener began in the early 2000s. And this research was done across the world in almost 100 countries. We started collecting data with our happiness at work questionnaire, which yields everybody that takes it a 10-page report. And we started looking in the early versions of this report, what does this data tell us and how does it fit together? So over the first years, we did a lot of refining and retesting of this questionnaire. And we did statistical analysis. We had an in-house research department with academics. And if they threw this data up into the air and looked at how does it land. That's what statistical analysis does for us. It forms clusters. And then we look at these clusters of data and say, what are the themes? And the question, of course, always is, how does that link between how happy we are at work and how high performing we are at work? How does it actually work? What are the tangible items that link happiness at work to high performance? And that's where we, over time, developed the performance happiness model, which I'm going to present to you in a moment. And at the time, the word happiness in the early 2000s was pretty controversial. People would say, what a load of rubbish, you don't go to work to be happy. I think actually in this year, 2023, those people are probably far fewer, thankfully. And there is an acknowledgement that the workplace should enable people to thrive, and that not only do we get the best work from them when they're thriving, but workplaces should be enjoyable and creative incubators of ideas and development for people as well as for the products and services of those organizations. But we weren't the only ones talking about happiness in the workplace. And there were movements throughout the world. The UN in 2012 declared that happiness should be on the UN agenda, and Ban Ki-moon at that point, as Secretary General, said that it is a human right for all people in this world to experience happiness. The UK government started measuring happiness in general. I'm talking about general happiness in 2015, just a few years later. And that's measured annually, and we can track that. But it wasn't new. Back in the 1700s, there was a movement called the Greatest Happiness Principle. And Jeremy Bentham spoke about the true measure of a country's success, a nation, should be the happiness of its people. And the government's policies should actually be aiming to optimize overall happiness for the greatest number of people possible. So this is not new. In 1968, J.F. Kennedy also spoke about the same thing and started talking about gross national happiness rather than gross national product, that economic term that measures probably everything that's important to a nation apart from the happiness of its people. So this is not new, but we were determined to come up with a definition for happiness in the workplace, and also a diagnostic instrument, and importantly, the answer to what do we do once we've collected this data. And we can work with data that we collect through our happiness at work assessment from EyeOpener, or with any organization's data. We can create a case for certain interventions, workshops that we can go in and help shift people's happiness and enable them to thrive more. And at the same time, of course, it's going to impact organizations' bottom line. So I've given you the definition, the EyeOpener definition of happiness at work. I'm going to now show you the business case for happiness at work, and then I'll show and share with you the performance happiness model. Probably at this point of listening to this webinar, you may not have yet taken your happiness at work assessment. When you do that, and I'm going to provide the link to that at the end of the seminar, you will get a 10-page confidential report for yourself. And you know that gives you some self-coaching questions and asks you and sort of prods you with questions about what are you going to do with this, because the agency is yours. There's probably more that you can do about your own happiness at work levels than you realized possible initially. And also ask why you, as a leader or a manager, and we hope that happiness at work, or happiness directors and happiness at work, people within organizations could ask why should we be increasing happiness at work for our organization or our team, and should understand the kind of answers that we get from that. So let's go to the business case for happiness at work. If we were to compare people, let's think of one organization. If we were to compare in one organization, the people who are least happy at work compared to the people who are most happy at work, we get very compelling outcomes from asking that question. And like most things, happiness at work will form a normal distribution curve or a bell curve like this. So the majority of people in an organization, in your average organization, are going to say they're averagely happy at work. And we'll have a few people who say they love work, they're really happy at work, and a few people who say they're miserable at work, and others somewhere in between. What, of course, we want to do through our interventions and applying tools and techniques for people is to skew that distribution curve to the right. We want to shift people up a standard deviation or two to make them happier at work. And the organization will reap the benefits. And the individuals and teams, of course, will reap those benefits too. So first of all, I'm going to talk about time on task. This was a term coined by the economist Edmund Phelps, who won a Nobel Prize for his work. And your time on task is literally the time that you are spending doing the work that you're paid to do. So on any one day, and we ask this in our happiness at work assessment, what percentage of your day are you on task? And from the data that we've got, and we've got, almost 100,000 pieces of data in our database, we can compare your score and your answer to that question to the rest of the database, the worldwide database. We know that the least happy people will say that they're only 40% on task in any one day. And that means only 40% of their day are they doing what they're paid to do, compared to the happiest people at work, who are about 82% on task. And that's a huge difference, isn't it? You're getting double the amount of productivity from the person who's happiest at work compared to their least happy colleagues. If we extrapolate that over a working week of 5 days, that means that the happiest person is doing about 4 days work, and the least happy person is only doing 2 days work. And people will say, but how come the happiest person isn't 100% on task? And my answer is always, we are human. We are human, and we're not robots. So things, of course, come along that take us off task. If we then extrapolate the data over a year, your happiest colleague is giving you 100 days more work than your least happy colleagues. So that's an important data point when we talk about that link between happiness and performance. It makes sense as well that when we ask how long do people intend to stay in their organization, that the happiest people will say, I'm going to stay another 5 years, 60 months. And the least happy people are already putting their CVs together to go out to the market to look for something else. And they will say they might stay another 18 months. So if those people that are unhappy, that are only going to stay with you a few more months, are your top talent, then you have a problem. We're wanting to retain our top talent. We need to make sure that they are also happy. Okay. Comparing happiest employees with their least happy colleagues when it comes to sick leave. The happy people take about 7 days a year. The least happy people, sorry, the other way around. The least happy are taking 7 days a year, and your most happy colleagues are not even taking 1 full day. sick leave. I'm actually also going to just digress from this a little bit and explain that the quality of feedback in an organization also gives us an interesting data point here. If people are not getting any feedback at all, or they're only getting negative or the so-called constructive feedback, they are taking double the amount of sick leave as their colleagues who are getting routine positive feedback. The importance of getting positive feedback in the workplace is huge, and it does impact on sick leave. So we could say that some of those people taking 7 days sick leave are those who are getting only negative or no feedback at all. And we can give more positive feedback. We can praise effort, not just the outcome and not just results, but we can praise effort to help, give recognition for people for the effort that they're making at work and give them that positive reinforcement. We also ask people what percentage of their day are they energized at work, and the happiest people say 78% of their day they go about their daily activities with a certain energy about them, a positive energy, compared to about 12% of their least happy colleagues. And of course, there's a contagion effect. We know, and we talked about the behaviors of people who are miserable at work. There's a negative contagion of somebody who's lacking energy in the workplace. Other people in the team feel that negative energy, and it grows and pervades through the team. But also we know that people are more engaged, they're more motivated, they're more confident, and they have more belief in their potential when they're happy at work. They're more liked and respected by their colleagues. They achieve their goals more often. We've talked about the feedback, but they do get more positive and better feedback. They learn more, really importantly, and they get promoted faster and earn more. And really importantly, they're more creative, they bring their best ideas, they're more innovative, and they're more resilient. So they're able to be more adaptable when it comes to change happening in an organization. So in a workshop, if you were a team I was working with, at this point, I would say I would give you an exercise to do, and I'd give you some thinking time. This exercise is called 5 Things. And the question is, what do happy high performers in your teams at work routinely do that ensures their own happiness at work and high performance and that of others in their team? So what are those habits, those routines, those rituals that those happy high performers are doing for themselves and for others? So you could do this exercise in your own time, make a whole list. You could probably fill a whole page, and then think, what are the 5 things that matter most out of that list? So it's a lovely exercise to do with your team if you're looking for a bit of an energizer or an interesting discussion in a team meeting. There's something that you can take away and do straight away. So at this point, I want to get you to the performance happiness model. Remember, I said this came out of us doing that statistical analysis and throwing the data that we'd collected, these tens of thousands of pieces of data, into the air and having researchers look at how they formed clusters. And this is what it looks like. So the performance happiness model is an ecosystem. Imagine this as a 3D model. It's got achieving your potential at its core, and that's what drives us human beings, is that we want to achieve potential in the course of our lifetime and at work. But then the structure of happiness at work are these 5 C's that surround this achieving your potential. And I'll explain more about those 5 C's in a second. But it's held together by 3 overarching elements. And these are 3 things that are held at an organizational level: trust, recognition, and pride. The questions are, how much do you trust your organization? How much recognition do you get for the job that you do every day for that organization? And how proud are you to say that you work there? And that pride, of course, taps into your sense of purpose, the purposeful, meaningful overall vision and mission of your organization. So these 5 C's, it's a 5-factor structure, and behind each of these 5 C's, we've got several items that are the sort of the that make up that factor. Contribution, first of all, is the effort that you make and how it's perceived. Conviction is your short-term motivation. When you rock up at work on a Monday morning, how motivated are you to be there? Your culture is what it says on the tin. It's your feeling of fit with your organization. Your commitment is your long-term engagement with your role. And people will say, you know, isn't happiness at work the same thing as employee engagement? No, it's not. Employee engagement is a really vital part of the happiness at work equation, as it were, but it's only part of it. Employee engagement is not as big a thing, as broad a concept as happiness at work is. And confidence, your self-belief in yourself and your team, your ability to do your job well. So that's the structure, the 5 C's. And here I'm showing the actual detail behind the 5 C's. Let's start at the bottom of this model, where it shows what sits behind achieving your potential. We ask in the happiness at work assessment, you know, what percentage of your day do you feel energized? And that enables you, along with the use of your strengths and your skills and learning new skills, to overcome challenges. And that gives this sense of achieving potential and growth. Learning new skills in the workplace is really important, not only to the fact your ability to do your job well, but of course to your sense of belonging to this organization that's investing back in you. And we know that when people have ample opportunities for learning in the workplace that's provided by their organization, that they are happier at work, that they give back to the organization. So there's a reciprocal relationship with those two things. So I'm not going to go into all of the detail of the model at this point. There are 25 things that make up your happiness at work there, in addition to the 3 overarching items that we talked about, the trust, recognition, and pride. And you're asked about this in your happiness at work survey, and you will get a synopsis and script about your happiness at work and what you can do to get more happiness at work in your individual report. And it will draw on these things. I'm just going to pick on a few things. For example, in contribution, one of the items that contributes to your contribution is being listened to. We know that if people feel heard, they are much likely to be happier at work. So listening skills are key. People need to have a voice, and they need to also know that when they raise issues that are important to them, that they are heard and that they have influence in their team and in their organization. If they don't, then we get what we call a silent voice climate in an organization, and that is really toxic and really dangerous, because learned helplessness kicks in. And there is nothing progressive about an organization or a team that is experiencing learned helplessness. It's a terrible sense that whatever you do, you're not going to make an impact. You're not going to improve things. You can't change things for the better. And people check out when that happens in a team. What else can I pick on? I think I'm going to pick on fair ethos within a culture. Really, what matters is that people can sense there's a fair ethos at work. That fairness does come out in some of the data that we collect around people's perception of how well they are paid for the job that they do. You'll see that pay and salary aren't part of the equation. They do matter to your happiness, but your general happiness. They don't matter to your happiness at work. But if you do perceive that you're not getting paid the benchmark for the work and the job that you do according to the market benchmark, then you will feel that there's a certain unfairness, a lack of fairness at your organization, and that will negatively impact on your happiness at work. So it does manifest, that your salary does manifest, but when it's not, when you're not getting what you think you should be paid, it comes out as unfairness. Also, having control of your daily activities. As human beings, we want autonomy. We strive, we want to have a say in how we go about our job day in, day out. So it's important, especially for the Gen Zs and the millennials, that we tell them what we want them to do at work, but they can work out for themselves how they get there. And that's also a massive part of camaraderie, is that they share and they work together to find the best ways for themselves. So I'm going to move on for the sake of time, because I want to leave time for questions. We've talked about trust, recognition, and pride. Let's now look at how you read, when you get it, how you would read your happiness at work report. So you're going to get this individual report. And on page 8, you will get a triangle that talks about your trust, recognition, and pride. If I show you what an example triangle might look like, we take the data that you've answered on a 1 to 7 scale, and we actually convert that with an algorithm onto a 1 to 10 scale. So this triangle has 10 concentric triangles within it. At the core of that triangle is the score of 0, and each line, each little triangle, as it moves out towards the outer edge of the triangle, is 1 point. So we normalize through this algorithm that that the mean compared to our database, the mean of our database is always 5 for each question. And the blue dot is your answer in comparison to that mean. By the way, the gray shaded area, if you think back to the distribution curve, is the 50 percentile middle section of the database. So you can see how this person who took it is just below the mean in terms of trust and how much they trust their organization. They're quite low in terms of how much recognition they get back from their organization for the job that they do every day. And that would tell you, that they're not getting enough recognition, and that in itself will be causing quite a bit of unhappiness. But they are quite proud, a little bit above the mean in terms of pride in their organization. So you can see there's a bit of a mix of things going on there. For all 3 questions, they're within the 50 percentile of the database. But there is great scope to work with this person or with their team to make those positive shifts happen in the workplace through different interventions to encourage more trust in the organization through things that the organization does to build that trust, to help people understand how, and especially managers and leaders, how to give recognition to people in a way that they want to receive it. And what can we do to make people prouder of their workplace and working for this brand? That's your employer brand. And that is what people talk about in social circles when, people say, how happy are you at work? That's the word on the street about your brand, your products, your services, and the experience of working for that organization. And that's your reputation. So as you know, that matters. On the front page of your report, you're going to get a pentagon, and it's going to look a little bit like that triangle. We read it in the same way. The pentagon refers to the 5 C's: contribution, conviction, culture, commitment, and confidence. So it could look like this. And this in itself, this pentagon tells me the story of what's going on for this person. So straight away, I can see they're scoring below the mean of the database on each of those 5 factors. Very much so in terms of culture. They're not enjoying the culture in that organization. So it may be that they don't enjoy the camaraderie within their team. They're not identifying with the values of the organization. They may be feeling that there's an unfair culture, or that they lack autonomy at work. Could be any of those things. And of course, this is just data. We really find out what's going on by questioning and coaching and asking those questions. So an individual will tell us their anecdotal information, which then obviously informs us even more on top of the data that we've collected. They're not massively passionate about their role. We can see that from the commitment and their confidence. Of course, if everything else is low, your confidence is going to take a knock. People's confidence is going to be low. So this person really isn't optimally happy at work. And unfortunately, the narrative that I'm telling you is quite common, all too common for people. Those kind of people are looking for jobs elsewhere. They're thinking about moving jobs. And unless they step up and are proactive about doing something about their happiness at work, which usually encourages a conversation to be had and more awareness within their teams and with their line manager, then that person is probably going to leave. And if you've got a whole team like that, you're definitely not getting their best work. Also, in your happiness at work report, you're going to get a synopsis from all the questions that you were asked, and there are about 80 of them, which were your 3 highest scoring answers and which were your 3 lowest. And that also gives us quite a big picture. So we can see from the highest, this person does believe that they generally do things better than others. They are resilient when it comes to coping with difficult times, and they enjoy having challenges at work. They really want challenges at work. They thrive on them. But the lowest also tells us a lot of information. How confident they are that they're going to receive a pay rise in the next 12 months. Does their pay raise, is it tied to performance? They believe not, probably in this case. And are they getting recognition for their achievements at work? No. So straight away, we can see that there are things that can be done. We might not be able to change the salary package, but there are always things that we can do that compensate for when we're not able to give pay raises. There are things that can be done. And one of those things is give recognition. We are human. We need to know that we're doing well and that what we do matters. It gives us meaning and purpose when we go into the workplace every day. So the science of happiness at work, of course, is part of a bigger topic called positive psychology. And in a positive psychology approach, we always start with what's good, what's working well, and how can you leverage that to help the stuff that's not working so well. We encourage people when they're looking at their happiness at work reports to do just that. So we would say, go through your 10 pages, use a highlighter, highlight whatever is salient to you and make notes. Start with what's working well, what's coming out that's working well, and what isn't then. And very importantly, what are you going to do about it? What are you going to action to leverage what you've got that's good and to address what's not so good? And very typically, people that I'm debriefing an we used to call it the IPPQ, the Happiness at Work Assessment Report, will say to me at the end of the conversation, wow, there's a lot more that I can do than I previously realized. That's really worthwhile. And sometimes that helps people not hand in their resignation and actually do something about it rather than jump ship. So the question is, why do we need more happiness at work? And I think we've probably already answered that. But remember that your happiness at work at an individual level is a personal resource. It's a personal resource that starts with that mindset. And remember, mindset is emotional plus cognition, emotional and mental. And we start with that, which we call psychological capital. And when we aggregate psychological capital at a team level, we get social capital, which is where people are working with motivation towards the same goals and making things happen. We then take social capital and we create human capital. And human capital, which is knowledge and skills and expertise and experience and talent, then drives financial capital. So that's what we call the mindset to profit chain in organizations. The thing is that most leaders and most line managers will drive profit and targets at the right-hand side of that chain without realizing that first and foremost, they need to pay attention to the psychological capital of each and every individual in their team. And that's this personal resource of psychological capital that we're talking about, that we call happiness at work. And when we've got that, it drives engaged behaviors. And we talked about those behaviors and what those are earlier in this talk. That's when people are creative, they're collaborative, they are engaging with challenges and they're driving those results. And when you've got engaged behaviors, you've got boosted performance. And you aggregate that, and we can aggregate the happiness at work assessment to give a team view and to give an organizational view, where we can give you a dashboard of each department so you can see how they compare with one another and how it looks across your organization. So we can see the happiness hotspots and the misery low spots in your organization. What's it all about and why do we want it? Well, people want to achieve their potential. And if they can do that in conjunction with the remit of your organization, then that has to be a win-win. Funnily enough, when we ask people to score how much they feel they're living up to their potential, it's the lowest score that we get overall in our database. If we score that out of 10, our average of the database says that it's just 6.38 out of 10. And of course, there's a gap, there's a huge gap. And that gap is filled with sometimes sadness or frustration or a life of work where people didn't reach their potential, a wasted time. It's almost like we've got a glass not half empty, but 1/3 empty. And what people are saying with that score is that they've got more to be had from them. You know, they feel that there's more in them that an organization could get, but somehow it's not being realized, it's not coming out due to their own limitations or team limitations, or poor management, poor leadership, or an unhappy culture. I did touch earlier on opportunities for learning, and this is really crucial. When employees believe that they've got plenty of opportunities for learning, it turns out that they are 17% more on task every day. They're 24% making more effort in terms of their contribution each day. And they're 29% happier at work compared to other employees who believe they're deprived of learning opportunities. So just giving learning opportunities, opening up discussions on interesting topics like what is happiness at work and what can we do about it, can make such a difference. And I'm going to leave you with a quote from Jess Price Jones's book. where she says happiness is not at work is not just a nice to have. It's not a luxury. It's a must have business fundamental that can be measured and managed. And this day, in a post-COVID era, a new era of work, it's the expectation of employees that leaders and organizations provide a happy place for them to work and to be. It's a much more compassionate, empathetic organization that people expect these days. And there you have it. There are 112,000 hours about that you are going to spend at work over the course of your lifetime. So let's make sure that they can be happy hours and that we can thrive as human beings, as teams, and as organizations.